Hi, good morning, everyone. So we'll make a start now. And today we are going to be discussing, the appropriate ideas, how to write appropriately using ideas when you look at one of the topics in English exam, which is writing essentially. Now, today's discussion is primarily going to be centered around understanding how do we write formally and how do we write informally, and what are the situations in which you essentially write, you decide to write formally and you decide to write informally. So I won't bother going through the presentation because the presentation is quite mundane in the sense it talks about a couple of things, but I'm going to try and explain that practically in terms of writing, and why do we need to look at formal writing and why do we need to look at informal writing. So in today's topic, the main aim is to cover what is formal writing, and what are the occasions where you would use formal writing. And then similarly, you will we will discuss what is called informal writing and what are the occasions in which we typically use the informal writing, English basically as a language, wherein we will write informally, to a person or to a family member or to somebody that we know quite well. So two things before I want to start. I just want to make sure that everybody is able to hear me okay.
Let me use your laptop here. Sorry.
Okay, Sabina, if you are, that's great. So I can probably.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Are you able to hear me okay and see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So, as I was mentioning, what we are going to do is let's start off with a practical discussion in terms of, where do we understand, what is informal writing and what is formal writing. So let me just bring my Word document up and we will start, this discussion. Okay. So, right. So I've opened up a Word document now, and basically what we want to be able to do is discuss, this particular topic, which is basically how to write appropriately. Now, because this is a practical topic, that's why I want to basically discuss it, by showing you practically how this topic has to be addressed. Because let's face it, in the exam, when you do, which is called the writing exam, this exam is 60 minutes long. Okay. In this exam, you get four different things, four different things, which four different, I would say, when I say things, I would say topics can be asked to be written. And this is one of the simplest forms of, exam. So you are either asked to write a letter or an email. So it'll be one of the two. So this is one, and you would be asked to either one of this will come in exam. And the second would be an article or a report. Again, either one of this will come in exam. So you don't get a choice that can I write an article or can I write an email or can I write a report or can I write a formal or informal letter, but essentially you'll be given a topic. For example, when we have to write in the writing exam, there are a couple of things that will come. Say, for example, the topic could be, the question essentially could be, it will say write a letter to the, say, for example, write a letter to the banqueting manager for booking the hall for a special occasion. Right? Now, this could be one of the question. The other question could be, I'm just guessing and obviously, telling you how these questions will come and you'd be asked to write. So here it'll say write, 225 to 250 words minimum, as a minimum. The second question could be write an email to your boss suggesting ways of celebrating, John's retirement in the company. Right? Again, there is where you would be asked to write, a certain number of words. The another question could be, there could be a passage, say for example, passage given for writing an article. So there could be some sort of example, given in terms, and I'll copy and paste an example here, and that would be, for example, wait 1 second. Let me just get something on. So that could be something, like this. So it will say, write an article. There'll be some sort of a background or a scenario given. Scenario is given. So here in this case, it says all sports can be fun, fair, and open to everyone. These days, sports seems to be more about money, corruption, and winning at any cost. Write an article for a newspaper in which you explain your point in the view of this statement. So this is a scenario which is given, and you'd be asked to write here. Scenario is given and asked to write an article, right? And the last would be if I have to write. So again, there could be a question which could be, say, for example, so here what I would want to do is example passage for writing a report. So here, basically, what will happen is that you'd be given some sort of an example passage, and you'd be asked that please write a report. So let me just bring one up, just as in a case. And so the question could be, you were walking to the school in the morning and witness an accident. The old lady and a few other people crossing the road were injured. Write a report of your write a report of the, say for example, event that you, or write a report of the incident, rather, not an event, incident that. So here I would say write a witness report of the incident. Now, these could be examples of how you could get two questions that you have to do. You don't have the choice of picking up the questions, but here the idea would be you have to write appropriately, obviously, because it's a writing test. Now, there are some bits that you have to look at, keeping in mind when we look at a writing test. So what will be important key points to note in this would be that you would need to know, for example, there can be no spelling mistakes because it's a writing exam. So English writing, you cannot have spelling mistakes. There, you have to use proper punctuation and grammar to be able to construct sentences or whatever you're writing, right? Now, this is more important because it's a writing exam, and here you're going to be marked, so the exam, if I put it this way, is total of 40 marks, and you need to be able to score 24 marks to pass. So, and in some cases, or in some questions rather, if I put it this way, you will have a minimum word limit prescribed for writing. So generally in a letter or email, there is no word limit given, but it is understood, given, but it is understood that you would need to, at least write 175 to, I would say, 200 words. And for article and report, generally you would see, so here you'd be asked to write for a minimum word limit, and that would be 225 to 250 words. Now, if you fall below that, obviously you'll be negatively, it'll impact your grading negatively, because the total exam is for 40 marks. And what you need to be able to do is hit that word limit when you're writing, an article or a report, because in most cases, this is something which is generally prescribed in the exam. Now, the main part of the writing exam is how to write appropriately. That is the topic that we are going to cover, today. So, how to write appropriately is the main part of the topic that we are going to discuss today, because you need to know what is formal writing and what is informal writing. Simply because, depending on the question that is coming in the exam, you are going to be expected to write and, obviously put your thoughts forward appropriately. So, in this context, one of the most important things that you need to look at is that, you need to be very clear that that you need to know very clearly that how are you going to write, and in what situation you are going to, pick and then write appropriately. Now, one of the things which I did was to discuss what are the differences between formal and informal writing. Now, obviously, there are different ways of writing. When we do speak and obviously communicate things in writing using English, there are two general ways that we normally pick out. One is formal and the other is informal. Now, our writing style, when we look at formal and informal, generally consists of what is called the tone of voice, and then the choice of words that we do in terms of text. And that allows us to understand whether the text that we are writing is coming across in an official style, in a formal tone, or in a formal style, or whether it's coming across in an informal style and it is coming across with, a bit, for example, easy tone. Now, when I say easy tone, it could be things like sometimes people end up using a slang, they use informal words, and that would mean that the context of conversation is something that you're having with someone when you know somebody already and you are quite able to get along with that person. And in such cases, you are going to be conversational, you're going to be casual, and you're going to be able to discuss things more openly and more freely with that person. And that is why your conversation tends to be, or your discussion tends to be with that person, becomes informal. So, couple of things that we need to look at before we get into the actual discussion of the topic is to understand what are the key differences between formal writing and informal writing. So what I did was, the best way to do this is to look at it from a point of view of table. Now, when we talk about writing, obviously writing can have a lot of features, things like tone, purpose, grammar, vocabulary that you are using, the use of, for example, slang and idioms, pronouns, and in some cases, the structure in which way you write typically would also determine whether the writing style is formal or informal. So, if we look at this particular table, generally, when you talk about formal writing, it tends to be serious, it tends to be quite polite and respectful, and the choice of words that you're going to use is going to be making it professional. So, this, when we identify with regards to that, the style of writing is serious, polite, and in some cases using professional vocabulary or professional words, then you would generally say that the tone of writing is official and it's formal. Opposite of this is going to be casual, conversational, and friendly. So, for example, sometimes you end up writing hi, and you would say, somebody's name. And then in some cases, you will say, Dear Mr. So and so. Then this explains the way you're writing formally or you're writing informally. Now, the purpose of writing, when you look at formal, is generally when you're writing letters, articles, reports, and if you're communicating it for the purposes of usage in formal occasions like businesses or for academic reasons, for official purposes, then in such cases, you would generally use formal writing. Informal writing could be when you're writing to a friend, you're writing to a colleague, or you're writing to a family member, and in such cases, or you're writing to your son or your father or your daughter, or in some cases your very close friend. Then in those cases, your choice of words and the way you write is going to be more personal and casual in communication, and that is why the purpose of writing to that particular individual is going to be deciphered or seen as what is called informal writing. Now, the choice of words and the how you write in terms of construction of sentences and the vocabulary that you use is going to be quite different from in both the occasions. So, when you're writing formally, it would be something different, and when you're writing informally, it will be something different. Now, give you an example here. If I was, say, for example, I visited the city center and I ended up parking, somewhere in the city center, which was not allowed. And later on, I got a ticket from the parking attendant. And then I felt that because it was a weekend and the parking was free, the parking attendant had given me a ticket, has given me an unjust ticket. And although I had the parking ticket displayed, but maybe he overlooked and he couldn't see that display ticket was actually put in the window, in the front window. Now, what you want to do is you don't want to pay that £60 fine, and what you want to do is basically write a letter to the council to appeal that decision that I have not parked wrongly. I had paid my parking, and paid for the parking, and I also displayed the parking ticket in the front of the window, and the parking attendant maybe missed to notice it. Now, in such cases, because you're writing to somebody to appeal for this ticket and the decision to be overturned, you would normally write in a formal way, because you would start with dear Mr. or dear Sir, Madam. And I will show you that exactly on the Word document, because what we want to be able to do is practically see it. And then you maybe also have a subject. If you're writing an email or if you're writing a letter, you'll put a subject down, appeal for the parking ticket, and you put the PCN number or whatever. And then you start with dear Sir, Madam. And then you have three parts to the story. First part is what you are going to maybe mention in one or two sentences. What is the actual letter about? In this case, letter or email about. And then this middle part of that would be to explain why do you think this has been given incorrectly. And in the last, you will ask for a resolution. And when you close your letter or your email, you are going to close it by using formal words like yours truly or yours faithfully or yours sincerely. And if it's a mail, you would say email. If you're writing and if you're sending that across as an email, you would primarily say, best regards or kind regards, and you would end up the email oblique letter accordingly with writing your full name, so that they can, obviously get in touch and confirm the decision whether it's been voided or not. Now, if it was something that you were writing informally to explain to your friend, saying that, went to, say, for example, a city center in Newcastle, and I was visiting, and, I ended up having a ticket. So the way you narrate this event and where you explain this to your friend and what you did, your choice of words are going to be in terms of, describing the event or what actually happened, are going to be pretty much words which we use on a day-to-day, everyday life. And your choice of words are going to be maybe seen as casual, because you're actually explaining that to somebody that you know. And the whole idea there is you're not appealing the ticket with, or essentially here, the idea is you're narrating the events. So when we look at, if I show you a few examples of formal writing or informal writing, you'd be able to basically make out and clearly see that whether this particular style of writing is formal or is informal. And this is what you need to understand typically when we talk about the two styles of writing. So what we want to do is, let's look at this, from a practical aspect, and why it is important for us to be able to understand this, so that at any given stage when we do when we are asked or when we get a question in the exam that you need to write a letter or you need to write an email, you would be prepared to be able to write simply because you know what are the differences and in what situations, essentially it is required to be done. So let me bring out, say, for example, a letter which would show you in terms of what could be the formal style of writing, and then I will show you something which is, an informal style of writing. So let me bring this across as say, for example, as an example that you see on your screen. Now, this is an example of a letter which is being written, to make a complaint about the meal that you had in a restaurant. And because you did not feel or did not get a good experience, and you felt that the money that you spent and the time that you spent with your friends or family wasn't worthwhile, and what you decided to do was for the sloppy service, or for example, the the shortcomings that you faced during the course of having the dinner at the restaurant, you decided that I would write a letter to the manager to explain why this is not acceptable and why it needs to be rectified so that other customers do not face the same situation. Now, if you look at this letter, and if you see it briefly, what do you see? Is this a formal style of writing, or is this an informal style of writing? So you can unmute your microphones and give me some sort of an idea of what do you feel, is this an informal style or a formal style of writing letter?
The formal style.
Formal. Formal.
And what are the reasons why you identify that this is a formal style of writing?
Because it's not a personal letter, one.
Yes,
And
The person is not a friend.
it's not a friend.
correct.
She's talking about their service and other things and the meal, so the construction was based on formal way of writing a email or a
Sure.
letter.
And the
Yeah.
ending too.
And the ending, yeah.
To address date and yeah.
And even the style of the wording used.
Correct. So that is very clearly spotted, and these all the points that you mentioned are correct, because what we look at in the formal style of writing is when you write a letter, you're always writing your address on the right hand side because you
Yeah.
want the person to communicate back. You're addressing the letter very clearly to somebody in the organization or in the company, and you're writing the full address. There could be an addition of a subject here, which could basically say what the letter is going to be about. There is a date on this letter, which basically also signifies that it is formal because you want the date and time, or in some cases, date to be noted. Obviously, if it was an email, then the date and time would be noted automatically. You're using formal salutations like dear sir and madam because you don't know the manager or somebody and you don't want to say dear miss or dear mister. So that is why you use both the salutations, which is sir and madam. And as you can see, it is very clearly written with no confusion in different sentences. And towards the end, as rightly pointed out, that it is identifying, the closing sentence as yours faithfully or yours sincerely or yours truly, and then the person's name. So that is why this is a formal letter. Okay, let's look at another example. Now, is this a formal letter or an informal letter?
Informal.
Okay, and why do you think this is informal?
Dear Maya.
Dear Maya.
That's correct. What
Hope
else can you spot?
Oh, the
Even
ending, hope to see you soon, and
the
I did
starting,
it, and the name. The
the words
starting, the words.
used.
That is correct. So if you see that there are a couple of things in this letter that you can spot. One is it starts off with Dear Maya, which makes it more personal. You don't see any sort of ending remarks like regards or, it's just
Faithfully.
informally ends by saying hope to see you soon. And the choice of words in which how some of these things are written, like use of apostrophe, question, it is more of a conversation that you can have with someone when you know that person, and that is why this letter, would be an informal letter. Now, let's look at a style, a similar style, but I'm going to show you another example, and that could be an example of, say, an email. So let me bring that across. Okay, that's not a very clear picture, but let me just bring one across. Okay, so if you see this particular email, don't be fooled by the fact that I'm showing you some examples here. So they are not meeting the word limit, but I'm just picking out a few examples just to help you recognize the
Subject.
style of writing first. But obviously when we are writing in a level 2 exam, our writing would need to be substantial. That means between 175 to 200 words for a letter or an email, and it would be, say, for example, 200 to 250 words for an article/report. Now, what kind of an email is this?
From David.
What
Can you
style
please
of writing?
expand the font size, please?
Right. Okay. So let
No,
me do one thing. Give me 1 second.
There's someone calling.
okay, yeah.
So if you look at it now, what is this? First of all, is it a letter or an email?
It's an email.
All right. Okay. And what kind of an email is this? Formal, or is it informal or formal style of email?
It's an info.
Informal.
All right. Okay. And what are the things that you can spot which make it an informal
Some
email?
colleague friends of mine are visiting your area. No, it's a formal one.
Okay.
It's a formal.
Okay. And why do you think it is a formal email?
It's not formal. It's an informal,
No,
informal email.
because it says some colleague friends of mine are visiting your area soon for a week's touring holiday. So it's a formal one.
All right. Okay. And any other thoughts on this? Is it a formal or informal?
I would say an informal because it looks like they know each other. You just need an opinion from him on what to do.
Right. Okay. So according to me, when I look at spotting a few things in terms of why this is an informal email, is because it is not writing or starting with some sort of a salutation. Hi, David.
Oh, okay.
Dear David. That is
Yeah,
one. Right. And then the other bit that you're saying is if you were writing a formal email, you would obviously be more, tuned to
Okay,
looking
more
at
can the that
punctuation.
professional,
and those things. Okay.
So
more
punctuation,
professional.
capitalization. So here, as you can see, subject touring holiday. So T should have been capital, you know. And then when you do read this, it doesn't start off with, if it was a formal one, when you write an email, you normally say, thank you for your email, or I hope you're well, or I hope my email of mine finds you in a good health. Something of that sort. You always confirm when you do write a formal email. So this tends to be an example of an informal way of writing an email because two, three reasons. One, I don't see capitalization and punctuation being done properly. And then there is no start in terms of dear, hi, or, whatever. And that would generally, and because the context of this email written in the way it has been written is very small, 2 sentences. Obviously, emails can be small, a couple of sentences, but generally speaking, because it has these things missing, I would generally, regard this as an email which is, informal email. Now, let's look at another example. And this another example that I have is not very clear, but let me try and see if I can make this slightly bigger. Or let me find something else. Okay, let's look at this one. Just give me 1 second. Let me bring one out. Okay. If you see this particular email.
Formal.
So when I look at this particular email, to me, it cries out that this is a formal email because one or two reasons. One, it is obviously having, as you can see, the subject termination effective immediately. It is perfectly capitalized and written in a bold and a different font. That is basically the subject here. Obviously, the to whomsoever it may concern generally tends to be
Okay.
when you're writing a formal letter or an email. And as you would see, it is polite, it is courteous, it is using the choice of words which basically inform that you are communicating something which is an important decision. And that is why this will be seen as a formal email, and obviously uses the word sincerely, faithfully, or truly, which is normally done in formal occasions. And in such cases, this email would classify as a formal email. So basically, going through this bit, what we have done is we have tried to identify how do we recognize a formal letter, informal letter, how do we recognize a formal email or an informal email. And this is very important because this is going to be one of the part of 50% of the marks of your writing test. Now, when we do talk about an example of, say, a report. So example of a report, if I bring across, um, um, if I show you one just as an example, let me just quickly show you that as well. So just give me 1 second. I just don't want to bring out something which is like already saying formal or informal, and I want you to, see it and guess. So let me just bring this over. Okay, so let me show this example, which is this example here. Now, this is an example of a report. So what I want you to tell me is this a formal report or an informal report?
Informal. Formal, I mean, sorry.
Can't see anything.
All right, okay, 1 second. Let me just refresh the screen. There we go. Can you see this now?
It takes.
It's formal.
Right.
It's a formal one.
Correct. So basically, this is an example of what is called a report, but reports are normally, always going to be formal. The reason I say this is my idea of asking you and showing you this was to primarily make you understand that, whether this is a report or an article. So first, let's understand. I'll show you another example, and what you need to tell me is, now, is this, so obviously, is this a report or an article? First, identify this. This letter that you see, or this first picture that you see, is this an article or is this a report?
It's a report.
It's a report.
Okay, what are the reasons why do you say this is a report?
Based on the reference, the
And then in the
subject,
beginning,
and yes, at the beginning, the address.
Correct. So, couple of things which stand out when we do talk about report is that it will basically have, 100% some sort of timeline. And one of the key things in a report would be that because you're reporting, report means that it is an incident, it is something which has happened in the past, and you're going to report about it, you're going to write about it. So, you will always find that in a report, you'll always have the date definitely mentioned. Then the other things that you will look at in the outlook or the outline of the document is that you would generally see that the context or a scenario or a location or a place would be clearly highlighted. So in this case, this is primarily showing that it is OPEX Apparels Limited, kind of a context or a scenario. That means it is primarily an apparels company, and in this particularly, you would see because the context is mentioned or at least being created, you would see that this is a report. Because you would always, an example that I would give you is, for example, you were working in the warehouse and one of your colleagues was operating a forklift or some sort of equipment, and there seems to be an accident. So what will happen in the report is you will write about what you have witnessed and how the accident took place. So you would always write, the location of the report. That means the location of the incident. You will say the warehouse, in Haywood, and then you will write the date on which this incident happened, and then you will describe the incident in your own words, but you're going to keep to the facts. It's not going to be an informal way of describing that I was walking through one of the aisles and my friend was operating a forklift and then suddenly something shift and there was a imbalance. And no, what you're going to do is you're going to write short sentences which are going to depict or talk about the situation and how the incident actually happened. You normally would put a subject in or some sort of a headline which would say what is what is this particular document about or the write-up about. And then you're always going to address it to someone, because when you're writing a report, you would be writing a report to address it to someone's attention. And that is what has also been done. It has been written to the managing director here. Underneath that, you see a headline or a subject which is in bold. And then because you're writing a report, it could be seen that you're addressing it to somebody senior or somebody who's actually up in hierarchy to you. And generally, a boss or a manager or your supervisor can ask for a report and say, okay, can you write me incident report? Can you write me a formal report of what you actually saw or what exactly happened on that day? And because it is being asked by somebody senior enough, that is why it is going to be seen as a report. And then because it's a report and it's a formal style of writing, because you're being asked to create this and write it, then in such cases you'd also be using words like yours faithfully or for example, yours truly or yours sincerely. And that would be essentially because it helps you understand that it's a report. So one, the context, maybe the letterhead or the location, the time of the incident, a headline or a subject, and then use of formal language would signify that it is a report. Now, here you're not going to be writing, by explaining this in a lot of detail. You'd also be concentrating on just the facts, and that is why, this will be considered a report, because you're reporting on or essentially providing a narration of the facts to somebody senior enough in your organization, in the company, or in a situation like this, and that is why it will be called a report. Now, what is this? Is this a report or an article?
Is an article.
An article.
Correct. So it's an article. Couple of things which stand out clearly is because of the fact that one, it has a headline on the top. It is written by, right? It has distinct paragraphs with headings, and it is talking about something which is going to be in general public or, for example, in a lot of people's interest. And it is written in the form like you normally see, like when you buy a newspaper and you read an article, you would be reading something which will be, engaging with you, talking to you. Articles normally have things like statistics, numbers, questions, and there are opening questions or sentences which are created in the article which will engage with the reader to make it interesting. And obviously, the way of writing is going to be formal, but it is going to be conversational and engaging so that the reader is, interested in reading the article. So the reason of why this is an article and not a report is, if you see the format itself, it has a headline and it says written by, or it says article written by. There's a byline underneath, and then it has got certain paragraphs. There is no formal way of starting or ending, just like we see in letters or in reports. Here, the starting could be in the form of introduction, and the end could be in the form of conclusion or summary. And basically, the idea here is the writer is actually trying to make you aware of the subject area or the or the topic that the person is writing about, and there will be a lot of information which will be given in detail, and this detail would normally be divided into three areas. So there'll always be, when you write a story, there is always a start to the story, there is a middle in the story, and there is an end to the story. So you'll always write in large or big paragraphs, and it'll always, if I read this, it'll always seem that there are three parts to it. There is a starting, there is a middle or the main plot of the story, and then towards the end there is a summary or there is a conclusion or the ending of the story. And that is why this will be seen as a article. So if I put it this way, there'll be an introduction, there'll be a main body, and there'll be towards the end a conclusion which will primarily point towards the ending of the description of what the person is trying to talk about. Is that okay? So when we look at the appropriate style of writing, what we are going to be essentially able to do is, in the exam, we have to keep in mind how do we write formally and how do we write informally. There are four types of things which can come in the writing exam. You have to be good with your typing speed, and obviously, because it's a 60-minute or 1 hour exam, and you are going to be asked two questions to do, either it will be a letter or an email, or it will be an article or a report. You need to be able to think of a context, and then have three parts to the story. So if it is an article, you'll have an introduction or a start, you'll have the main body, and then towards the end you have a conclusion. If it's a report, you would need to know what style and how do you write it. So if I were to give a question and say write a formal letter, rather than using the word formal letter, but I would say you are requested to write a letter to the manager in the restaurant making a complaint that there was no information available on, say, for example, allergy. So in such cases, you would essentially be looking at writing a formal complaint letter. Now, if you were asked to write a letter to your friend, or an email to your friend, whichever way, a letter or an email to your friend, inviting him or her to spend their summer holidays with you in Manchester, then this would be a context wherein you've been asked to write an informal email or a letter, and you're writing it to a friend. Because the word friend comes in, straight away it gives you the clue that it is going to be an informal way wherein you will talk about why you need to visit Manchester. Again, you would explain that, this is the best time to visit Manchester. These are the time in which the school holidays will be there, and I love to have you with us there. And then in the middle of the letter or the email, you will explain what are the main activities you can do or expect to do when you are in Manchester. And then towards the end, you end it by saying, I look forward to meeting you and having a great holiday or a great summer together, something of that sort. And that would be an informal way of writing. And then when you're asked to write a report or an article, you would very clearly know how the report is actually written. The report has certain characteristics, which would say an incident report or a witness report. Basically, you would repeat the word report, and then you would say report written by. You put the date, and then you put a headline of what the report is about, and then you explain it in three parts. The starting of the report, which is to explain what this report is about. In the middle section or the main body of the report, you will write what is actually being asked for in the question, and towards the end, you will conclude or summarize. But you are going to be writing about just the facts. You're not going to be, making things up. You're writing. The report is supposed to be normally quite succinct, which is basically to the point, brief, and details are included which would actually stand out. And the reason why somebody is reading this report is because they were not present, and they want to understand through your eyes and through your writing of this report that what could have actually happened on that day or in that incident, and that is why you write the report. Now, not all reports end with yours faithfully or yours sincerely. You might just write the title of the report on the top and say report compiled by or report written by, and you write the date, and that would be okay. So you would not sign in the end by signing off to say yours sincerely, but in some cases you can do that as well. Now, this particular report is written in a letter format, and that is why you see that towards the end, the person is actually signing off. But a normal report, if it is written, you would generally see that, in such cases, the report would have everything on the top and then the 3 sections or 4 sections in which what you're explaining is going to be available. And then when you're asked to write an article, it could be write an article for your local magazine to get this park included and explain the reasons why you think your park needs to be included in the tourist magazine for Manchester, or it could be any topic under the sun. But here the format and the way you are going to write the article is always going to be starting with a headline, which could be in bold. It could be saying article written by, or you could have a sub headline. Like, for example, normally if I say, why do you shop at Tesco's? That could be the heading. Every little helps could be the byline. And then underneath that, you could write, an article by so and so, right? And then you have 3 paragraphs which will start with introduction. There will be some sort of a background or a scenario building that you do by explaining an introduction. Then you write the middle paragraph, which is the main body of the article explaining things. And here the style of writing is going to be open-ended sentences, asking maybe questions, using statistics, because the idea here is you want to engage with your readers, you want to be conversational, but although being conversational by using a formal language or formal tone of writing. And then towards the end, you conclude by telling them the summary of why they should consider this, or why it had happened, or why this should be done, or why you should look at taking that subscription, things like that. So these are the reasons why you need to know at least visually the format and how it looks like when it comes to the writing test. Because when it comes to the writing test, the first thing that you will see is it will basically ask you to decide what is being asked for and then what is required to be written. So if you have visually this picture in your mind that, okay, an article looks like this, a report looks like this, and a formal email looks like this, and an informal email looks like this, and a formal letter or an informal letter looks like this, then you will not spend a lot of time. You will straight away be writing, because keeping in mind that you have to write to certain word limit. You have to have enough time at hand to be able to write and not make mistakes, which are spelling mistakes, punctuation mistakes, or grammar mistakes, because this is a writing test, and in writing you are going to be scored on your punctuation, your sentence construction, your mistakes if you make in spellings, and in your grammar, and that would be deducting marks if you're not being careful in terms of writing this context. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Any questions on this so far?
No. The only problem I have is I came late. I don't know if I can get a recording of it, please.
No, you'll be able to get a recording. All sessions are
Okay.
recorded, so I will be
Okay.
able to send you a recording of this just after the session. No problem at all.
Okay.
Now, if you
Thank
see
you.
on the, no problem. If you see on the Moodle, where you go in, what you're generally going to see is that in the Moodle section, there is a clear section given on appropriate writing. So let me show that to you as well before we close. And then you could actually look at doing some bit of practice. So if I'm logged into Moodle now, so if I just collapse all and basically go to this part, which is write text to an appropriate level, that is the bit that we discussed today. And here there is a small bit of an exercise that has been given, which I would suggest that you could look at in terms of helping to decipher or basically identify what is formal style of writing and what is informal style of writing. So if there are some sentences which are given here in the task, you need to read the sentence and decide whether it's formal or informal. And then I've given the answers of this also upon Moodle, which I'm going to unhide right now. And that would allow you to also see and check for yourself whether you have been able to, answer these two
properly.
tasks correctly or not.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Please, after the section, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead. You can ask me a
Okay.
question now, not a problem.
Okay, I've not been able to open the module. I don't know. I
Okay,
don't know what to do.
what is your name? Not a problem. Let me have a quick look. What is your name?
Join Christiana Asemota.
Toin. Okay, 1 second, Toin. So basically, you are definitely on Moodle, but maybe your username and password is something which is, I would say you might not be knowing. So what I'll do is just after the session, I'm going to email you the username and password again so that you are able to, log into Moodle.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
If
Thank you very
your
much, sir.
password isn't,
I also ask a question.
yeah, go ahead.
So it's a concern. Those
Yeah.
who started late
Uh-huh.
last week and this week,
Yeah.
I would like to know if you've already had some form of Zoom.
Well, basically, what happens is this is a course that we keep running throughout the year. So, if you start somewhere in the middle, you'll still end up covering all the sections that we are doing in any case. So, it is a rolling session, kind of a schedule that we do. So, you don't need to worry about in terms of whether you missed anything or not, because each of these sections are independent and each of these sections can be studied independently in no particular order, and that is why it is not of I would say any major significance that if you've started today then you've missed any sessions. No, we'll be covering all of these, and these are topics that we think are required for you to understand the writing part of the English exam. So although, as you can see, we have arranged things like punctuation, grammar, spelling, but these are essentially bits that we will not really go through. These are bits that you have to go through by yourself, and then we are going to talk about it because in some of the sections we will use these as examples. So that is where we will be looking at covering some of them. So my suggestion would be to start in independently going through some of the material once you get the logins on Moodle, and it will take you not more than 2 hours. If you have to go through all the sections, presentations, it'll take you not more than 2 hours to go through it. But the main part after you've read through all the bits would be to look at doing a bit of practice. And that is what the live sessions that we are doing today or like today are going to be of more important, because you are able to ask questions on your queries. You're able to see and discuss actual practical examples that we want to look at, because these are vast topics, but they are also very informal and quite vast topics because you're learning a language in a way. But what you need to be also knowing is that what is the practical aspect of the usage of this, and that is what I would suggest, that there are some sections that we'll pick out for discussions which will be useful, because when you are in an exam situation you would need to know exactly what is to be done rather than remembering, oh, punctuation had this or grammar had this. No, but what is the practical side of it that you will get in the exam is what you need to remember.
Thank you.
Okay. No worries.
Thank you
So
very much,
what I've
sir.
also done is the handout which I created for discussion today. I've also uploaded this handout here, how to write appropriately. So the table of formal, informal, the examples that we discussed all have been uploaded here as a Word document that you can download as well.
Okay.
Okay. That's great. So I don't know if some of you are doing maths. We'll be starting the session of maths at 10:30. So I will see you then. And the recording of this particular session I'll make available just in a couple of minutes on the WhatsApp group. So for those of you who's joined us a bit late, can actually look at watching the initial part of the recording. And I will see you later for the maths session.
Okay. Thank you very much.